Hello, everyone. Welcome back to King Po Myers, and this is King Po Myers True Crime with our very special guest, Sammy. How you doing?
Hi, I'm here. I'm alive. I actually woke up today, so it's an accomplishment in and of itself.
We all did. We're all alive. Well, but the people we're talking about are not.
Sadly, no.
Um, let's get right into this because this is our third episode. If you haven't, go listen to our last episodes. We had a lot of fun
Yeah.
talking about Mr. Wallace Souza and Anissa.
Yeah. These are it's interesting because the take on the last episode, I think that we took on that for Anissa is not a take that most people go down that when they tell that story. Because if you think about it a little bit more, it's very interesting. But go check out that episode if you're curious on what we're talking about for that.
What do you have for us this week? What true crime story does that I have no idea? Remember, I have no idea what's coming our way. What do you have for us?
Ooh, so we have a juicy suspect list on this one, and it's one that a lot of people know. It's one of the most common true crime cases that people know. And we're talking about the Black Dahlia, Miss Elizabeth Short.
All right. So
Yeah.
I just know the name from when I studied criminal justice, Black Dahlia. I think I may have done a paper on it, but
Really?
everything is very, very foggy.
Oh
So
my gosh. So you don't know much about this case at all.
I really, really don't. This is gonna be
Wow.
all new for me.
Oh my gosh. Oh, this is exciting. Because it's very common that most people know about this case. So a lot of I put I put a lot of detail into this so that like I could like bring something different to the table and like try to bring in some things that most people like don't talk about.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's dig right into it. Trigger warning up top. There is possible mention of sexual assault and incestuous abuse and possible abortion. So, just as a heads up to anybody sensitive to those topics, there is mention of that in this story. And with that being said, let us jump right in. So, this story is about Miss Elizabeth Short. She was born July 29th, 1924. We are going way back. So our last two were pretty recent, but we're going pretty far back on this one. So we're in 1924 in Hyde Park, Massachusetts.
Oh
Elizabeth's
God.
parents' name, yeah, I know, Massachusetts, right?
Less than an hour from me.
Yeah. So her parents were Cleo and Phoebe Short. And it's interesting because where she goes is pretty close to me. Um,
Hmm.
at some point in her early life, her parents had separated, and her father ended up moving to Vallejo, California, which is in the East Bay, in the Bay Area in San Francisco, in California. So it's like if you are in San Francisco in the city, it's maybe hour and a half out, maybe. Um, that's where Six Flags is. So
Nice.
that's the only thing I know about Vallejo is that there's Six Flags and I sometimes call it Valley Joe. So when Elizabeth was 18, she was a little bit of a wild child. She felt like she didn't really belong in Massachusetts. She thought that she was meant for something bigger.
Excuse me.
I mean, she like wanted that city life, like she wanted like it was
I traveled the world. I understand her.
yeah, at this point it was probably around like the 1945, like 50, somewhere around there. And it was like Hollywood was just kind of starting up.
Mhm.
So there were like movie stars and shit all over the place. So she wanted that. She wanted stardom and glory. Um her father, Cleo, in Vallejo, at some point offered for Elizabeth to come out and live with him because he was working in the Navy Yards and he was gone most of the day. And in return, Elizabeth could cook and clean around the house, basically take care of daily like household chores and stuff like that. Um, and basically like just take care of things while he's gone because he's gone most of the day. So she agreed, and Cleo gave her $800 so she could move in and come stay with him. She's super excited that she's getting a whole new start in California. So, unfortunately,
Mhm.
this stay would only be 3 weeks. She was partying and staying out all night, and she wasn't doing any cooking and cleaning instead of rent for staying with her dad. And her dad was like, what the fuck? You're not doing what you said you were gonna do. Like, it's just becoming more of a headache than I actually need. So it wasn't clear whether he kicked her out or whether she left on her own volition, but basically he was like, this isn't working out. And she packed her shit and left. And that would be the last time her father ever saw her.
Oh.
Yeah. So she wasn't about to go back over to Massachusetts. That just wasn't going to happen. She's already in California. She wanted to make the most of what her time was there. So she was looking around for a job, and she was able to find one working at Camp Cook on the military base, which actually I don't know where Camp Cook is, and I live in California. So where is
Well,
that,
your state
actually?
is massive. In your defense, I mean, Jesus.
Where is this? Montana. Territory? What? Where is? Oh, Santa Barbara. Okay, that's down. That's down. That's South California, Southern California. So, she went quite a ways to Camp Cook.
Mhm.
Like that's quite a few hour drive down there. So, she gets this job, and she was working at the post exchange, where it's basically a store where they sold like food, clothes, basic necessities, basically for the army base.
Mhm.
And she would only be there for about 9 months, and then she decided to leave and head down to San Diego. She had no plan. She didn't know why she was going to San Diego. She just wanted to go to San Diego. She had no plan, no job, and she didn't know where she was going to stay, but she was going to San Diego. She knew that. So she goes down there, and when she's down there, she meets a woman named Dorothy, who worked at an all-night theater.
Okay.
So Elizabeth and Dorothy get to talking, and they kind of hit it off. And Elizabeth ends up telling Dorothy, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. And that she didn't have anywhere to go. So Dorothy offered Elizabeth a place to stay at her house, and Elizabeth agreed. And she said, I promise I won't be long. I don't want to impose on you. I don't want to bother your normal home life. So she would end up staying with Dorothy for about a month. From December 1946 to January 1947. And one day, she told Dorothy that she was off to her next adventure, and that someone by the name of Red was going to be picking her up at the house. So Dorothy said her goodbyes, and she hopped into the Studebaker coupe that rolled up. That was the last time Dorothy ever saw Elizabeth.
Oh my God.
And that was early January that she left. So now we get into the sad stuff.
Okay.
She left Dorothy's house early January.
Yeah.
The morning of January 15th, 1947, a 911 call comes into the LAPD office. Betty Bersinger was taking her 3-year-old daughter, Anne, on a morning errand to the shoe repair store near what is now the Crenshaw neighborhood of LA. They passed an empty lot on Norton Avenue, which is kind of a residential place.
Mhm.
And Betty said, I glanced to my right and I saw this very dead white body. My goodness, it was so white. It didn't look like anything more than perhaps an artificial model. It was so white and separated in the middle.
Oh my God.
So police go out to the location, and when they arrive, they see a naked body laying on the grass out in the middle of the suburbs. It was just not a place you find a body, because
Mhm.
it's a residential area. So like, how are you gonna put a body there?
Yeah.
And where was I? My eyeballs. Sorry. So the body was found lying on her back on the lawn area, and it was just steps away from the sidewalk. The most concerning part was that the body was cut in half, and there was no blood anywhere at the scene. Not a
What?
drop. It was completely drained of blood. Like she had been completely drained and then scrubbed. Like there was
What?
no blood anywhere in her body, anywhere on her body, anywhere around the scene where her body was found. There was no blood. They didn't find any type of identification. So at the time she was just Jane Doe, but after running her fingerprints through the system, they found it to be none other than Miss Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old.
Mm.
Really friggin' young. The body was clean cut, straight across. The coroner said almost with surgical precision, leaving no trauma to internal organs or bones. It was just about an inch above her belly button, and the lower half of her body was disconnected from the upper half of her body, and it was like somewhat like disconnected, like kind of like offset a little
Yeah.
bit. But they were by each other enough. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the crime scene photos. They are
I have
available
not.
online. I don't recommend it for anyone who's squeamish, or I don't want to ruin your day, but the photos are online basically.
Okay.
And I've seen other photos. I went to the Museum of Death down in LA, and they have crime scene photos of a lot of famous crime scenes, and Black Dahlia is one of them. So
Oh, good
she,
God.
yeah,
Looking at him right
yeah,
now, folks. Oh, wow. Yeah. Not for the faint heart.
yeah. It's kind of, so it doesn't look like she's like just stretched out. It looks like she's like kind of slightly offset, just very
Yeah.
slightly, to the point where that body is not connected.
Yeah.
There's a sheet over it, so you don't have to kind of see too much of what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a sheet over the body in the photo if you're curious to look it up. She was really oddly posed. Her eyes were open.
Mm.
Her hands were above her head with her elbows bent and her legs out straight and spread apart. Her right breast was also cut off. And police noted that each of her big toes, just the big toes, were painted a vibrant red, like it looked like maybe it had just been done. So also, I think I watched a video recently on this. I can't remember who said it. I want to say it was like Bailey Sarian or something. She had mentioned a reasoning for that potentially, because that one always got me. I couldn't remember. And she actually mentioned a reason for it, which it's like a really good idea. And I honestly should probably do this if I ever wear peep toe shoes. But sometimes if women wear peep toe shoes, and like those are kind of shoes that like where only the big toe and like the second toe show,
Mm-hmm.
they will only paint those toes because they're the only ones showing when you're walking around in those shoes, which I think is a genius idea. And it might explain why, or maybe there's just some weird foot fetishists that painted her toes before she died, which would suck, but that is a possible explanation for it.
Okay.
I just thought it was an interesting detail. She also had deep cuts across her forehead, which I thought was weird. There were crisscross cuts on her pubic region and on her hip, which literally resembled a game of tic-tac-toe on her right hip.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The most common known thing about this case was the fact that she was also cut from each side of her mouth about 3 inches from side to side, giving her a smaller version of a Glasgow smile. Which typically a Glasgow smile goes from ear to ear.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was only 3 inches from the corners of her mouth. It was clear to police that she was actually strangled due to the ligature marks around her neck. And there were also marks on her arms and leg that showed signs of restraint and being tied up. It was also noted that her body had been lying face down for an extended period of time after her death because of the lividity on her front side. And if you don't know what lividity is, basically like when you die, Whatever position you die in, the blood settles. Basically, gravity causes the blood to settle on whatever side, in the way that you're positioned. So
Yeah.
if you're laying on your back, like the blood is going to settle in your back. If you're laying on your stomach, the blood is going to settle on your stomach.
Yeah.
And it kind of just looks like really, really severe bruising. Like if you've ever gotten road rash and you've gotten like bruising because of road rash, like it kind of looks like very blotchy and purple. And that's basically what that is. So when she was found, though, she was found face up. So that doesn't make sense that the lividity would be on her front side. The lividity should be on her back if she was found face up. So the police it was clear to them that she was moved and that the body was placed there. So she was not killed there, which I don't know how you would drain blood, cut a body in half, and do all that shit just in the middle of the suburbs anyway. That should have been clear to begin with, but that just confirms that she was not killed there. Upon autopsy, they found that she had been hit over the head. However, officially, she died of hemorrhage and shock. Marks on her legs, wrists, and neck and right thigh suggest that she had been bound and tortured. The slits at the corner of her mouth were made while she was still alive.
Fuck.
She had also suffered a concussion from the blows to her head. So those are all the gory details. I'm done talking about the gory details now. So after IDing the body, the police were able to locate Elizabeth's father, Cleo, because he was in Vallejo. So police go out to his home and let him know of his child's death. And it's so confusing, but this guy like ends up being such an asshole. He answers the door drunk and angry. And after being given the news, said he could give a shit less if she was murdered and that he didn't want to go down to the coroner's office to identify her body.
What a guy.
What a guy. I can see why the mother divorced him. So of course they called the mother in Massachusetts, and as moms do, she booked a flight down to LA as soon as she possibly could because that's her daughter. So
yeah.
All right. So now we're going into the investigation part of it. So the police go out and find Dorothy, the woman that she had been staying with for the last month and a half. And Dorothy tells them that this guy, Red, had picked her up at the house in the Studebaker coupe. And his name was Red, but this was enough information for them. So police started to search all of the motels in the San Diego area. And when they go to this motel in Pacific Beach, they had records that showed a guest who checked in on December 19th to this motel. And this person drove a 1939 Studebaker coupe. And the guest name who checked in was this guy named Robert Manley. I guess his nickname is Red for some reason, but
okay.
Yeah. So police look this guy up. They find a picture, bring it over to Dorothy. Dorothy identifies him correctly as Red, who picked up Elizabeth that day. So before I dip into Robert over here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the media coverage because it was absolutely insane. Like the amount of attention and like the frenzy that went on in the newspapers and the media at this time was insane. Like the media got a hold of this story. It's a beautiful young woman murdered and cut in half in the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Newspapers were really into giving out names for things back then. So they named her the Black Dahlia for her dark, full hair that she always wore a flower in, and her love for lacy black underwear. I don't know why we're sexualizing this, but okay.
They sexualized a woman.
She was naked when she was found. How do you know that she liked lacy black underwear? You know, it's like,
wow.
Yeah. So people in the community were following this story pretty heavily. A month goes by and police still have 0 suspects, and the community is getting worried. They're like, what's taking them so long to solve this? I don't like this, that they haven't made an arrest yet. Like, I don't feel very safe. But because of the heavy media reporting, it led to a lot of people coming forward and actually confessing to killing Elizabeth, but none of them had actual evidence that they did indeed kill her. They were just trying to claim it.
What?
People are psychotic. You've absolutely heard that people like just love to be like, I did this, just to take credit. Like, it's, I don't know why you would want credit for a murder, but go off, I guess. Like,
What do you do when you're a cop in that situation? Like, sorry, there's no evidence, you can go?
I
Like,
don't know,
what do you want
man.
from me, man?
That's a great question. I don't know what they would do on that. Like, I feel like that, I don't know. Like, do you just be like, we'll give you a call back and like let him go and like never call him back? I don't know. But my favorite fun fact about this case is that during the initial investigation into her murder, police received a total of 60 confessions, mostly made by men. Wait for it. However, since then, over 500 people have confessed to the crime, some of whom had not even been born at the time of her death. Which is just fucking hilarious, in my opinion.
Wow.
You were not alive for when this crime happened, yet you are confessing to this crime. I just thought it was so funny.
I don't know what to say to that. I
500 people, dude. 500.
I mean, confessing because like at the time it was so big, so you just want to like you want to be part of it, like you want
I
your
guess like
name
you
in the
want to go
paper?
down in history that you were one of the people that confessed. Like, I don't know. Like, man, I don't know. I mean, some of these people, there were people that like were proven that like didn't end up doing it that were listed in the suspects list because they either knew information or something that made them a little bit suspicious, but it was very clear that they didn't do it. However, though, the LAPD, 9 days after the murder, did receive letters from the supposed killer. It contained some of her belongings, some of Elizabeth's belongings, like her social security card, her birth certificate, photos of her, and an address book that was missing a few pages. She always kept her address book on her. So, it was missing a few pages. So, of course, people are suspicious about that. And they're like, oh my God, someone who killed her may have been on those pages, ripped it out, and blah. But all of the items had been cleaned of fingerprints using gasoline, and the envelope had been addressed using cutout letters taken from movie advertisements.
Is that where we got the classic?
I don't know if that's where they originated. I don't know. I thought that, okay, so my thought was that originated with Jack the Ripper, which we will cover in a future episode at some point.
Yes.
But I believe in one of the Ripper letters that there was like cutouts from the newspaper that they would like put together the words with the letters. I believe that one of those letters was like that.
Okay.
So it might have been Jack the Ripper because that's the earliest case I can remember with that happening.
I thought these were written in blood, or like
no,
in
but
red.
it shriveled up. He wanted to write it in blood, but it ended up going thick. I mean, I think he even says in the letter that it went thick like glue or something like that, and he couldn't use it. So, I don't know, but wrong case. Not talking about that right now. 13 letters in total were sent to both the police and the press, many signed Black Dahlia Avenger. So we got a superhero on the books now. He's part of the Avengers. This is Endgame, man.
Disney is not happy right now.
Gonna get sued. Oh man. So let's go back to Red. This guy that picked her up. All that jazz. So we're going back to Red now. After running a background check on Red, his full name again being Robert Manley, his real name being Robert, they found he lived in South Beach, California, and he was married with a wife, and he worked as a sales engineer. They also found that on January 17th, 2 days after the murder, he took off to San Francisco with a guy named Harry. So police go out to Harry's house and they see no one's home, but they take a peek in his garage and find Robert's 1939 Studebaker coupe. They're
Oh.
like, ooh, sexy. Actually got the right guy that we're thinking of. Um, so then the police stake out Harry's house for 2 more days, waiting for them to come back. Why you wouldn't just, I guess it would have taken longer for them to figure out where they went in San Francisco, I guess.
Yeah.
But like, I'm just gonna sit here and like nap in my car for 2 days while I wait for these guys to roll up.
Well,
Like,
that is a stakeout. Like,
yeah, it's sad. But so they come back on January 19th. And at that point, that was the 19th. The murder happened on, I think, the 14th, 15th. So 4 days after the murder, they come back. And the police take Robert into custody, book him, and search his car. Robert was interrogated and given 2 polygraph tests, which he passed. They had nothing on him, so he was released. Later on, after Elizabeth's address book was received anonymously with certain pages ripped out, February 5th, 1947, 2 arrests were made for the case. They arrested Robert again and got nowhere. So they had to let him go again. They also arrested a man named Dan. Dan actually confessed to the murder, but later said that he was mentally unwell, and that's why he confessed, but that he didn't really do it. So a bit of a timeline on Red. His relationship with Elizabeth kind of began about a month before she was murdered, when Red noticed her outside of a bus station in San Diego and asked if she wanted a ride. According to Robert, at first Elizabeth would not speak to him, but he was persistent, and she eventually did get into his car. And for the next month, Manley would take Elizabeth on dates when he was in town in San Diego. When Elizabeth decided to leave Dorothy's place, she contacted Robert and asked him to come pick her up. Robert said next they both stayed platonically in a hotel in Pacific Beach, which is where they found his name on the registry.
Yep.
After which, Robert drove them both to Los Angeles. There, he says he brought Elizabeth to the Biltmore Hotel, which is now the infamous Hotel Cecil Hotel, basically.
Okay.
Do you know, are you familiar with that?
I am not, unfortunately.
It is the most haunted hotel in Los Angeles. Like,
Oh, okay.
I believe it is the most haunted hotel possibly in the United States. I could be wrong about that. But that is where, oh God, what's her name? The girl that was found, they had elevator footage. Help me. What's her name? Hold on. You know who I'm talking about. You have to know who I'm talking about. If you don't, I will be very surprised. It was, oh my God, what's her name? She was found on the roof. Oh, please. Oh, please. What is her name? Elisa Lamb.
Not
You
ringing
don't
a bell. I
really? That's unsolved. We don't know what happened with her. She was schizophrenic.
Mhm.
I think she had some sort of mental illness, and she was studying abroad, I think, and she was on her own, and she stayed at the Hotel Cecil, and there's like a bunch of elevator footage of her acting really weird, like getting in and out of the elevator doors stayed open for way too long. She's just acting so odd. But her body was found in the water tanks on top of the roof in the hotel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that hotel. It is also where I believe Richard Ramirez used to stay, the Night Stalker. Um, yeah.
I feel like we could do
So,
a whole episode on just this hotel.
oh yeah, no, I absolutely could. It is one of the most haunted. There have been so many people that have like killed themselves at this hotel. That they've just jumped off the roof. There's so many people that have jumped off the roof of this hotel. Like if you, there's so much that has happened at this hotel. And it's to the point where I believe they renamed it to like Stay on Main or something like
Yeah,
that.
the Stay on Main Hotel. It has a
Yeah.
3.0 rating.
Yeah, because it's fucking haunted. So, but it's actually under construction right now. So no one's allowed to be in there. However, I have seen a guy on TikTok. I hate to bring TikTok into this, but I have seen a guy on TikTok who lives across the street from Hotel Cecil. And he keeps seeing people in the windows of the hotel, like different hotel windows. And ain't nobody in there, bud. Like no one's staying there. Shit's under construction. So what are you seeing? And like it's very concerning. I highly recommend that you look into that, but
Absolutely.
we'll keep going. So that was the last time Elizabeth Short was seen, was at the Hotel Cecil. That's the last known whereabouts of her. And Robert Manley left her there at 6:30 on January 9th. And that was 6 days before she was found.
Okay.
As far as the investigation was ever able to ascertain, Hotel Cecil was the last place she was seen. But when questioned by police, Robert pleaded his innocence. He passed 2 polygraph tests, and years later, Robert was committed to a mental hospital after hearing voices in 1954. So this was like 10 years after this murder took place, after they originally like questioned him.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors gave him sodium pentothal, which is basically like what people think of as like a truth serum, which doesn't do that. And again, it seemed he was innocent. So he was kind of cleared. And Robert died on January 9th, 1986, after an accidental fall in his apartment in Anaheim, California. 39 years to the day after he last saw Elizabeth alive at the Biltmore.
Of course.
39 years to the day, Dillon. To the day. Crazy. It's just insane. So moving on to our second suspect. I won't get to the one that I'm pretty sure did it until the very end. I've saved him for last. The second suspect is a woman.
Oh.
Yes. Her name is Christine Reynolds. She had some interesting information. So on November 24th, 1950, this would have been 6 years after she was killed, a woman by the name of Christine Reynolds, who was 35 years old, a mother of three, called the Oakland Tribune to give them a tip that she was going to turn herself in and confess to the Black Dahlia murder. By this time, Christine was the 27th person to confess to the murder. So clearly police were skeptical.
Yeah.
Christine told police that she had had many love affairs with Hollywood movie stars, but that she also said that Elizabeth was living with her at the time of the murder in Hollywood. So Christine said that she knew Elizabeth as Libby and that they had met at a bar in Hollywood about 3.5 years ago, which don't think that meets the timeline.
No.
I think she would have been dead by then for 2 years, I think. Christine said that they had been in a bit of a love affair of their own and that they would meet at motels for sexy times.
Oh.
Yeah. So, of course, the newspapers ran with this. They ran away. They ran far. They added this to the story, described their relationship as perverted and unnatural because it was, of course, the 1950s. And people were just losing their shit. Like they lost it over this. They were like, "Oh my god, she's sexy, she's been murdered, and she's having a lesbian love affair." Like people were losing it. So Christine also told police that Elizabeth was also running around with another woman while they were together. So 4 nights before Elizabeth's murder, which this timeline does not add up at all, Christine was drunk and irritated because Elizabeth wasn't home yet. It was getting late and she wasn't home, so she went out looking for her. And that's when she found her at a bar with another woman named Louise. Elizabeth and Christine got into a bit of an argument, and she and Christine left together. Christine and Elizabeth were arguing while Christine was driving home, and Christine said that she leaned over and she began to choke Elizabeth, and that she was fighting back and she was trying to get away from her. So Elizabeth eventually was able to break free and get the car door open, and just kind of run up the street. So Christine pulls over and walks up behind Elizabeth and puts her in a chokehold, just like a half Nelson. And then Christine remembered that she had a switchblade in her pocket. So she pulls out the switchblade and she has it in her hand to like intimidate Elizabeth. And Christine tells police that she completely forgot she had a knife in her hand because she was drinking whiskey. And then she just started to stab her. But she didn't remember that she stabbed her. But apparently she does now. So, police aren't buying it. Clearly, police are not buying it. Christine was saying that Elizabeth was killed and left there on the street. But when the police first found the body, there was no blood anywhere. And there would have been blood there if you had stabbed her. However, there was one detail in Christine's story that was not public knowledge. Christine told police that she had cut some of her goddamn hair off and shoved it up her effing pussy. When they found Elizabeth's body, whoever killed her did indeed cut off some of her hair and shove it up her hoo-ha.
What?
Yeah. The information was not public knowledge. So, like, literally no one knew about this detail except for police.
Did she say anything about the fact that Elizabeth was, cut in half? Like, did she say that she did
but
this?
that was all public knowledge. That was all stuff that was in the newspaper. I mean, I don't know how you're going to cut somebody in half with a switchblade. I mean, that's a lot of, I don't know, man.
I don't think that's actually physically possible. Now that I'm thinking about it, like
I mean, with a lot of work and a lot of strength, probably.
With that can-do attitude.
Oh yeah. So police aren't buying it. They were like, "We know you're lying. This shit's lining up," and that is when Christine completely fell apart. That is when she completely broke down. Christine said that she had a girlfriend who worked for the LAPD and that she was the one who told her about the hair situation, and that's how Christine got the information. However, there is a reason for her lying about this. There is. She said that 2 days before Elizabeth's body was found, that Christine had woken up with blood all over her clothes and her shoes, but she didn't recall what had happened because she was heavily drinking at the time. So she said she went straight to the police department with her bloody clothes and told them, like, I think I did something, but like no one did anything. Like no one took her seriously. So she just left. Yeah. But in her brain, the time of the murders kind of almost lined up.
Yeah.
So naturally, she thought it was Elizabeth. She was like, "Oh my God, if she's just got found murdered, I must have killed her." Mm-hmm. She might have killed somebody. Who knows? We will never know.
Yeah, she stabbed somebody. She cut someone's hair off.
She did something. So, yeah. So, and it was just like just boiling in her, and it was sitting with her, and that's why she decided to come forward and confess again, because she just couldn't live with herself knowing that she may have killed somebody. So that's the story of Christine. Now we're going to Bizarro World. More bizarre than that.
We're not in Bizarre World already.
I know, right? So the next three subjects have I was very surprised to see them on the list because I never hear anybody talk about these three suspects ever. I never hear anybody mention them like as to like why they were suspects. I never hear anybody mention like what they did that would make them a suspect, like if they were ever interrogated. I never hear these names come up in any video I've ever heard.
Okay.
So these three suspects are Bugsy Siegel, Woody Guthrie, and Orson Welles. Three huge names. Huge names. So we're going to start with Bugsy Siegel. If you don't know, Bugsy Siegel was a LA Jewish mobster. He allegedly was a suspect in her murder. So the reason why he's a suspect is unclear, other than the fact that he's a fucking mobster. Especially since he was more concerned with the Flamingo Hotel and Casino at the time. And he was known to be a ladies' man, not a ladies' killer. He also was involved with the Chicago outfit starlet, and his on-off girlfriend, Virginia Hill. So Bugsy Siegel is a suspect in another murder case that happened in Hollywood. I can't remember the name of the woman right now. But she like owned like a restaurant. And I think he wanted to turn it into a hotel casino. And that's why people think that he may have killed her, because he wanted the property and she wasn't about to give up her restaurant. So there's that. But according to a man named Don Wolf's book, The Black Dahlia Files, The Mob, The Mogul, and the Murder That Transfixed Los Angeles, he posits that Siegel was the actual murderer. It has also been surmised that if Siegel had any involvement with the Dahlia murder, that he would have sent Mickey Cohen or one of his other henchmen.
What? Mickey Cohen, is that? No.
What?
I'm thinking of Casino. I think that was
Mickey
70s.
Cohen.
No, sorry, not him. Different guy.
I mean, he did survive until 1976.
Mickey Cohen.
He.
So this person's saying that
he kidnapped Patty Hearst.
Oh.
Yeah. He was at Alcatraz. He was convicted for tax evasion in 1961. And he served some of his sentence at Alcatraz. I don't know when Alcatraz actually shut down. Because I've just always known it as like a prison museum, because that's like just part of San Francisco history.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I've gone there more than one occasion to just go on a tour. Like we went there for a field trip when I was in like 4th grade. So I don't know when it actually stopped holding inmates, but
it's a hell of a place to take 4th graders.
I mean,
maybe middle school.
I went to Catholic school, dude. They did not care.
This is
Passion
where you
of the
will
Christ
go.
in 3rd grade, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Passion of the Christ in 3rd grade.
Oh my! Wait, really?
Oh yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Thank you, Miss Baldelli.
Shout out to Miss Baldelli.
Shout out to Miss Baldelli. You made my life a living hell. Yet another theory was that the murder may have been an attempt to frame Bugsy, or just because another mafia member wanted to frame him, Mr. Jack Dragna. He wanted revenge for his attacks on his business interests since his arrival in the 1930s. So
The
that
fact
was theory.
the fact that this one young woman is pulling in all of these different characters from all these
Yeah.
different walks of life
Yeah.
is
So
insane.
it was like rumored a lot that she was a sex worker. I don't think she was. It was also rumored that she slept around just in general and had like multiple boyfriends, but she wasn't in LA long enough to make those connections. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? I mean, at least with how LA is now, I don't know how small like the Hollywood bubble was back then, but it's like you can't make that kind of connection in a month.
Mhm.
So I don't know. But I mean, she was also like partying every night before she left Massachusetts. Not Massachusetts, Vallejo. So who knows? She very well could have gone to several parties that she kind of rubbed elbows with some higher people. Who knows? So now we have Woody Guthrie. Uh, Woody Guthrie was a folk singer. And if you don't know who this is, he is the man who sang "This Land Is My Land. This land is your land." Yeah, that's Woody Guthrie.
Not Woody.
Yeah, he was one of the many suspects in the murder, according to LA District Attorney's files. According to a man named Ed Cray, who published a book in 2004, he drew police attention because of some sexually explicit letters and tabloid clippings that he sent to a Northern California woman who he was allegedly stalking. The mailings disturbed the recipient so much that she showed them to her sister in LA, who contacted the police. I guess those letters like kind of resembled the Avenger letters with all of the cutout words and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's partly why. But he was quickly cleared of any involvement in the murder, but various authorities attempted to prosecute him with minor success on charges related to sending prohibited materials through the mail. Which I don't know what other prohibited materials he was sending. I don't know if I want to know what other prohibited materials he was sending. I don't know if I want to know, but I don't think mail is. You're gonna stalk someone. Don't do it all the way from Southern California.
Right?
All right, and our last one for these wacko ones is Orson Welles. So this one actually has the most credence to it out of these three. Other than maybe Bugsy, I think he has a little bit less than him. But in her year 2000 book, Mary Passios, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, she was a former neighbor of the Short family in Medford, Massachusetts, suggested that filmmaker Orson Welles as a suspect. The author based this theory on such factors as Wells' volatile temperament and his creation of mannequins 3 months before Elizabeth's death that supposedly featured lacerations virtually identical to those inflicted on Elizabeth.
That's weird.
The mannequins were used in the House of Mirrors set for The Lady of Shanghai, a film Wells was making with his ex-wife Rita Hayworth around the time of the murder. Side note, love Rita Hayworth. The scenes containing the set were deleted from the film by Harry Cohn. So they never made it into the final cut. But they were made. He made these mannequins that never made it into the final cut. And I think it was because he did these mannequins 3 months before she was murdered. And I'm sure production of that film took more than 3 months, but they were also at the same time, they were cranking out shit pretty quick in Hollywood back then. But in one of Short's last letters home, her older sister Virginia claimed that she had written that a movie director was going to give her a screen test.
Hmm.
The author also cites that Wells' familiarity with the site where the body was found and the magic act he performed to entertain soldiers during World War II. She believes that the bisection of the body was part of the killer's signature and an acting out of the perpetrator's obsession. Um, Orson Welles actually applied for his passport on January 24th, 1947. The same day, the killer mailed a packet to LA newspapers with all of her personal belongings. He left the country for an extended stay in Europe 10 months after the murder without completing the editing of Macbeth, the film he was both directing and starring in. Despite persistent attempts by Republic Pictures to get him back to complete the film, he refused. That's a little sus.
Did he ever come back?
I'm sure he did. I mean, like, I'm sure he did eventually, but he was not. I don't know too much about Orson Welles, not gonna lie.
That's weird.
Yeah, the author also said that witnesses she interviewed stated that Orson Welles and Elizabeth both frequented Brittingham's restaurant in LA during the same time period, and waitresses believed that Elizabeth was going out with someone at Columbia Pictures. But, however, Orson Welles was never a suspect in the investigation when it was ongoing.
Okay.
Ever. All right, so now we got a mystery man, which I don't know his name. I think this man died with the secret. So in 1997, for the 50th anniversary of the murder, which is kind of weird to celebrate 50 years of somebody being murdered, but okay. The LA Times interviewed Ralph Asdell. I apologize. My mouth is not working in making words today. So if I am like slurring or messing up words, that's
You are not slurring. It's
my
all good.
mouth is not working. I'm trying to enunciate as much as possible as well. So Ralph Asdell, the last living detective from the original investigation, he claimed that within weeks, he found the man he believed to be the murderer. Ralph had received a few tips and a description of a man witnesses noticed near the empty lot where Short was discovered. Other witnesses described seeing a black car around dawn. Ralph found a man matching that description whose car, which had recently been repainted, also looked like the one described. But because Ralph had no hard evidence and only a hunch to go on, he was unable to confront his suspect. But as of 1997, he believed that this mystery man was the Black Dahlia murderer.
Wow.
Yeah. And we'll never know. We'll never know who this guy was because he was never able to confront him ever. And I don't know when Ralph passed away or if he's still alive, but he will probably take that to the grave because he doesn't know the name. He just found a dude with a car. All right. Suspect number 7, and then we have our final. This one actually connects to another case. So, are you familiar with the Cleveland torso murders? No?
I want to say no.
Cleveland torso murders or the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run?
Torso murders is ringing a bell, but it's all.
It was a guy that was in Ohio. He would take either sex workers or poor people, like people living in kind of like homeless areas in Ohio, where over by Kingsbury Run, he was taking people basically and cutting them in half, and sometimes you would find the top half, sometimes you wouldn't. I believe there were 2 victims that were never identified, but Jesus. That was a crazy case. And they thought that they found a guy who was drugging people. Like, I think he was taking people from the homeless encampment that was over there and was like, I'm going to get you, like, do you want to do a medical trial for me? And they would be like, yeah, sure. And then he would take them over to his medical building, which was actually parallel to a mortuary. So no one would suspect a thing if you saw bodies around that area, just as a side note. But he would take it to his medical building, basically sedate them and I'm sure experiment and shit before he killed them.
Oh, that's fucked up.
Yeah. I believe that is I personally I believe that's the guy that did the Cleveland torso murders, but
Mhm.
let me let me bring it back home. So
Bring it home.
there were a lot of signs pointing towards Cleveland, Ohio. There were a lot of murders happening in Kingsbury Run, like I said, before Elizabeth's body was found. That they were all cut in half, just like Elizabeth was found. This was the famous Cleveland torso murderer, blah. It was said that the torso killer had moved out west, where it's believed that the Black Dahlia could have been his final murder, but this is solely speculation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just like a little tidbit that might connect to another case. I'm not so sure if I believe that. There was like another case that they said that they might have connected it to, which was like something like the lipstick killer. Uh, I can't remember what that one's about right now, but it was like a lipstick killer. He would kill people, cut them in half, and it was mostly women, and like write in lipstick on their bodies. I believe. So I don't believe he was ever caught. I could be wrong about that. Don't take my word on it. But now we move on to our eighth and final suspect, who I personally believe did it, and so do most people.
Who did it?
Dr. George Hodell.
Who is
Yep.
Dr. George Hodell?
All right. So he's well known, even to those kind of casually familiar with this case. After retiring as an LAPD homicide detective, having worked on over 300 murder cases, Steve Hodell, George's son, published his research claiming the murderer was one George Hodell, the detective's own father. So George Hodell was a wealthy doctor in LA, described as well-connected, very handsome, with a high IQ.
Okay.
He was in charge of a venereal disease clinic in LA, which supposedly gave him knowledge of the sexual lives of people ranging from local sex workers to the Hollywood's elite. George, on the other hand, had 11 children by 5 different women.
Okay.
Yeah. So he wasn't a practicing surgeon, but he breezed through medical school where he studied to be one. So after his death, I'm going to go back and forth. This isn't necessarily in order, but I'm going to go back and forth a little bit because it makes sense here and there. So after George died, his son Steve found 2 photos of a woman who Steve believed to be Elizabeth Short. He began investigating, coming to believe that his father had a romantic relationship with Short and that they had been spotted together at a hotel in downtown LA. George would have had the medical training needed to produce the surgical mutilation performed on her. Like, mind you, he missed no vital organs.
Yeah.
So, the son had also suggested that George is also responsible for the murder of Jean French, which I believe was one of the lipstick killer victims. I think. Oh God, I could be wrong. I need to look more into that one. Jean French, which occurred a mere 3 weeks after Elizabeth's on February 10th. And like Elizabeth, French received blunt force trauma to the head, and her body was also found oddly posed in a vacant lot early one morning. Her body bore the initials BD, possibly thought to stand for Black Dahlia, written in red lipstick. Notes allegedly sent by the killer after the murder match George Hodell's handwriting, according to handwriting analysis performed by one forensic expert hired by Steve Hodell. So, I mean, it was one handwriting expert that he hired to say, yeah, your dad wrote this. But so, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but it did match. That expert also believed that the BD initials written on Jean French's body matched his handwriting as well. Now, I got something to say about that one because I don't know if you've ever like written with like chalk, like a long like sidewalk chalk, but your
Mhm.
handwriting is not the same when you're holding like a pen or pencil, like you're feeding a spoon
Yeah, not at all.
to a child. Your handwriting is not going to be the same if you're writing in lipstick. How are you able to match handwriting when it's not a pen? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because handwriting analysis has to do with pressure and like what emphasis you put on certain parts of the letter and stuff like that. You aren't able to see that with lipstick. So that
Not
one
at all.
got me, that seemed a little bit confusing to me. That was a little suspicious. But evidence was found that George Hodel had 50-pound sacks of concrete sent to his home for remodeling on January 9th, 1947. The last day Elizabeth was seen alive, and that was less than 1 week before her body was found. So he got concrete sent to his home on the day that Robert dropped her off at the Cecil. So the son claimed that there were similar bags found near her body that police speculated could have been used to carry her body from the car to the place she was found. And what's more is that George Hodel drove a 1936 black Packard that looked similar to the descriptions of the black car seen at dawn near where her body was found. Now we're going to get into some not so great stuff. George Hodel was not a good man. One of George's daughters, one of his 11 children, might I add, Tamar Hodel, recalled her father hosting huge parties at their Hollywood adjacent home, which included guests such as big movie stars, and also included one of George Hodel's friends, surrealist artist Man Ray. Many people posit that George admired Man Ray so much that he wanted to emulate him in some way. People have found striking similarities in some of Man Ray's art pieces that eerily look like the crime scene. And Tamar Hodel also recalls nude modeling for Man Ray as a child. Yeah, here's where it gets bad. Here is where it gets bad. After running away from home in 1949, Tamar reported her father to the police, telling them that George had tried to teach her about oral sex at age 11 and that he offered her to his friends for sex when she was 14, and he himself had also had sex with her. On a side note, at age 15, Tamar gave birth to a baby girl in San Francisco. George attempted to perform an abortion on his daughter, but was unsuccessful. That girl that was born, Fauna Hodel, would be adopted by a family in Nevada and not know of her biological grandfather until much later when she was doing research of her own.
Ugh.
Yeah. So George Hodel was ultimately acquitted of incest charges. Just another case of us not believing women. Woo! After several other family members testified that Tamar was lying. However, the family could have been motivated to lie because George was the breadwinner supporting the family. So, I mean, that's kind of fucked up. Morally, would you really be? I mean, unless you knew that this dude killed somebody and you're like, if I don't testify against this girl, he's going to come for me because I said he's a rapist. So, like, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know if I could morally do that. That's just wrong.
Oh, absolutely. But then you kind of get into like, once again, piece of fucking shit.
Yeah.
But back then it was like you said, it was the breadwinner. It was dad. Like, you can't go against dad. Like,
Yeah.
it's dad.
Yeah, exactly. But
Wow, that poor girl.
I feel so bad for her. I don't know if she's still alive, but my God. I mean, she should be, right? I mean, he has 11 children, so I don't know how it's spaced out that way. But if it's the sister of the police detective who's still alive, I think, yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at some point, police bug his home and they listen into his daily conversations. On February 18th, 1950, George is talking on the phone at around 8:30 p.m. They hear a woman scream. 2 minutes later, they hear a woman scream again. It was noted that a woman was not heard any time within the house after 6:50 p.m. This woman was not in any conversation and not heard of again until the time of letting out those two screams. Police go check out the house after this and find nothing. And once police leave, they hear George making a phone call. George is saying something along the lines of putting a pillow over her face and covering her with a blanket. And then after some time passes, they hear George saying, supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary. Oh, I don't know how the inflection was, but it could have been killed her.
Yeah.
Maybe I did kill my secretary. So it could have been him like saying it in disbelief, like killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary, but it all depends on the inflection. I don't have the audio tapes. I don't think they are released to the public. So I'm not able to really hear what the inflection in his voice was, but it almost sounds like that was like a direct confession, which you would think that that would take him in. But George's secretary at the time had just died from an overdose. That was a little bit suspicious. Yeah. There's also transcripts from the house bug that I'll get to later that it was believed that George was giving payoffs to law enforcement. So I'll get to that in a minute. In April of 1950, there was actually enough evidence to charge George for the murder of Elizabeth, but when they tried to make an arrest, it was too late. George fled the U.S. to the Philippines. Although he fled, he would come back from time to time to the States, not telling anyone. And Steve, his son, believed that when he came back, he was actually killing people when he was here, and then he would leave again. And then, not so coincidentally, a woman murdered in Manila in the Philippines in 1967 reportedly was also found bisected and posed in an empty lot, just like Elizabeth. Steve claims that at the time, George Hodell was living just a half mile away from the crime scene in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
So he definitely did it, right? Right? Like, you know he did. So in 2012, Steve Hodell visited his childhood home with a production crew, another former police officer, and a search dog that picked up the scent of human decomposition in multiple locations on the property, such as the alleyway in the back of the house. According to Dr. Arpad Voss, a leading forensic anthropologist who helped pioneer chemical analysis of human decomposition, this doesn't technically indicate that the remains are located where the search dog found the scents, because the markers that the dogs detect can move, and like because they're like carried over water or like other forces, you know. However, this leading anthropologist that helped pioneer chemical analysis of human decomposition analyzed the soil sample taken from the alley behind the home himself and found that it was positive for human remains, though the sample indicated a death that occurred anywhere from 20 to 100 years ago. So that's kind of a big area. That's a big margin. George's son claims his father via his connections and occupation. All right, here we go. had knowledge about the corruption in the LAPD and their ties to prostitution and abortion rings, and that the police covered up Hodell's guilt to avoid their own dirty laundry being aired. While it's true that many officers in the LAPD were notoriously corrupt in the early 20th century, the transcripts from the Bugs in the House also reportedly quote George as saying, "This is the best payoff I've seen between law enforcement agencies. I'd like to get a connection made in the DA's office."
Really?
Yeah. So, Hodell was also interviewed as a suspect in the nearby June 1949 murder of Louise Springer, the Green Twig murder, which I don't know much about, though evidence to support this accusation was not publicly available until July 2018, which is probably why I've never heard of it. George Hodell returned to the United States in 1990 and married for a fourth legal time, to a woman named June in San Francisco, where he remained for the rest of his life. He died in 1999 at the age of 91. Lived a long, full life, that motherfucker did. And that is the story of the Black Dahlia.
So the case is ongoing.
The case is still technically unsolved, but we're pretty fucking sure George Hodell is the murderer. The amount of evidence against him is just appalling. So,
one, good for the son for being like not protecting him, being like, no, you're a piece of shit, and trying to solve this.
Yeah. Now, a note about that actually, people have said that could potentially be like his motive for like kind of placing this on his dad.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like he was investigated back in 1950 when this guy was still a kid. So they think that the motive of Steve now may have been, oh my God, you raped my sister. Fuck you. I'm going to frame you for murder. So that's what a lot of people are thinking, that they have like a personal agenda. But he was also being investigated prior to all of this coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if the police were active enough with him as a suspect to bug his house, that says something.
It does.
Yeah.
And those transcripts, like the things that he was saying.
Oh, yeah. They can't talk to my secretary now because she's dead.
I love your 1950s voice.
It's like evil villain shit, you know? It's so funny. Supposing I did kill her.
Jesus.
I did actually recently, a while ago, find out that like the reason why people spoke in that very specific way, like the way that you do this, like the reason people spoke like that back then was because they were very adamant about, what was it? I want to say they were adamant about this being brought to international audiences, and that included Britain. And so the classic like 1940s, like that kind of accent is like, it is a mesh between a British accent and an English accent so that it could be understood, and it felt like it came from both parties.
Oh,
I believe. It's something like that. It is a specific dialect that it was created for movie making in order to relate to other speakers, basically.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so it's not just that like, oh, people just talked that way back then. No, they talked like me and you are talking right now. It's just that in order for people to hear, for broadcasting purposes and for music and for movies and TV and radio, like they wanted a wider audience, so they would use this very specific accent that was developed. So I don't know. I would have to do more research in that. I feel like I heard it in an acting class at some point. I'm a theater person, so but I would have to do more research on that. But I thought it was a really cool little fun fact that it's not, they just didn't talk like that. It's actually they're putting on a fake voice just like I am.
We have to bring that voice back. I mean,
yeah, I definitely will when like there's older cases. I think it's one of my favorite voices to do.
I really want to do it right now, but I just want to make a total ass of myself.
Me. It's just freaking.
I almost burst out laughing when you were talking about our three weird suspects. It was Bugsy, Woody, and Orson. I'm like, the most 1950s men. Like, just those names. Not even like what they did, just those names.
Yeah. I sound like Skeletor.
Jeez.
The show was made in 1983. Why are they using this kind of voice when they're talking with Skeletor? Makes no sense. Anyway, that is the story of the Black Dahlia. That's all I got.
So you are firmly in the corner that it was well, he was a doctor, right?
Yeah. He was a doctor at a venereal venereal disease clinic.
What? I mean, once again.
So when you think of venereal diseases, I keep thinking of like, I almost think of like chicken pox or like a flu, like a fever, like yellow fever and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure a venereal disease clinic was meant for like sexually transmitted diseases. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong about that. But I think that was the specification, and that's why he knew about most of the sex lives of the Hollywood elite. And I'm sure he probably knew a lot about a lot of the dirty laundry that was going on in the police department too, because he was a shady dude. And I'm sure if somebody in the department got somebody pregnant that they shouldn't have gotten pregnant, I'm sure they came to him and they're like, hey, shady dude, you do this under the table for me. So, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like people knew he was shady. I just don't think they thought he would go on to kill somebody. If he even did.
So with that theory, though, I mean, obviously, clearly, murder in the first degree, but then who put him up to it?
Himself. He wanted to emulate Man Ray.
That is
so he sees surreal art. I mean, Man Ray is very like his stuff is very odd. Let me get his.
He sounds like a SpongeBob character.
Yeah, a lot of his art is very very bizarre. He's got some pieces where like body parts are replaced, or there's like eyes in a weird place where they shouldn't be. There's just like a lot of pieces he has that are very surreal, and maybe he wanted. Yeah,
I'm looking at the art as well.
Yeah, so a lot of people are like, well, there's like one or two pieces of Man Rays that they said looked eerily similar to the crime scene photos of Black Dahlia. If you type in Man Ray Black Dahlia, I guarantee to you that you might be able to see. Yeah, there's a, I don't know if that actually comes up with anything, but either way, Man Ray had some interesting art that I think that maybe George wanted to emulate in some way. And so he did it in his own unique way by killing Elizabeth. So.
And you were telling me off air, there's even like the list goes on, like the suspect list.
Look, man, I was up pretty late last night doing like 7 pages. I have 7 pages of notes for this thing. I had to write it on a separate document and then copy paste it into our cast document in order to read through it. But I didn't even get to all of them. Like, there's several other suspects that were deemed viable. There's another doctor. There's a dude from the New York Times, I think, that maybe impregnated her. Like, there's George Hodell had a friend named Fred Sexton that is a suspect. Yeah. Francis E. Sweeney was, I believe, was he the one? Oh my God, wait a minute. Francis E. Sweeney, I think, was the suspect in the torso killer case. I believe. Why do I know that name? Politician. Excuse me?
Ladies and gentlemen, what if right now Sami is solving the Black Dahlia killer
No,
mystery?
oh my God, no. No.
Wait, it all makes sense.
God, no. Francis E. Sweeney. Why do I know his name? Yeah. Yeah. Francis, no. So they probably were like, oh, yeah, it was probably the Cleveland torso killer. But the person who was most known as the Cleveland torso killer was Dr. Francis E. Sweeney. He is not the politician. It was a completely different man with the same exact name, and he was a doctor. So, yeah, it was, I believe, Detective Elliot Ness in that case. He failed a polygraph test and avoided prosecution by committing himself to a mental hospital. He taunted the police chief with obscene and menacing notes, served in World War I as a medic, and discharged with a notation that he was 25% disabled. Discharged from practice after having been committed by his wife for treatment of alcoholism in 1933 and divorced her in 1936. Found sane after 2 court-ordered psychiatric examinations in 1938, committed himself to a veteran hospital in 1938 and emerged briefly in 39 and died in 64. But he was a doctor. Yeah. Basically, he was the one that I think it was the guy that had the practice that was over by the morgue, that had basically the entrance to his office was at the back side of the morgue, where they would like roll them out. And I think he would just, when he wasn't working on bodies that he killed, he would be working on bodies that were there. Yeah. So I don't know. Could be him. On the official, I don't know why it says Criminal Minds fandom. That doesn't make sense. This is a very real fucking case.
Very.
Yeah. So they have like list of victims, and it says possible victim was Elizabeth Short. But yeah, that's our story. That's what we got. I'm pretty sure it's George. Just by the bug alone. By bugging his house alone and hearing his conversations, I'm pretty sure it's George.
Wasn't the bug for something else? That was for after the daughter went to the police and that she was sexually abused.
I don't know when exactly the bug was placed. Let me go back in my notes really quick.
George got a lot going on.
Well, I'm sure that he also was suspicious because of his car, the concrete. The way he spoke. Yeah, and also he was thought to be responsible for the murder of Jean French. So, he had a lot of suspicious things going on, so they probably bugged it for any of those. So,
do you think there will ever be like that piece of evidence
that puts the nail in the coffin?
That letter, do you think that will ever happen, or do you think this will be like, kind of like Jack the Ripper, where
we're pretty sure and we don't know at the same time? Yeah. I feel like Ripper is more vague because there's so little information on it. This was in recent history enough that we did have like records and stuff that weren't lost to time. Um I'm sure Steve will work until the day he dies to prove that his father killed this woman. So whether he actually does end up finding something or not, who knows? Maybe one of the wives knows something. Maybe the wife that he had in the Philippines knows something.
Mm.
I don't know, man. I mean,
Yeah, the fact
I'm
that there
sure.
was an exact kill in the Philippines, down the street from his house in the Philippines.
Yeah, it's a little sus. Almost exactly the same.
And the big thing for me was when they were bugging his house, the police heard screams.
Oh, yeah. That was
Uh,
probably his secretary.
Fucking LAPD cops. Well, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
classic George, am I right? Like,
Yeah.
assholes, can you do your job?
Yeah, exactly. Cover me up. Destroy these tapes. Lord.
So, thank you so much for all the information, Sam. Thank you for telling that
Yeah.
insane tale. KPM true crime fans, who do you believe is the Black Dahlia killer? One of the 8 that we talked about, or was it someone else?
Or someone completely different. Was it George Hodell's friend? Do you think it was a Cleveland torso killer? Like, there's so if you if you search up the suspects and look at the list of names that is there, the sheer number. I tried to eliminate the ones that didn't have too much credence to them, and I just added the ones that I thought were ridiculous and interesting. But there are so many suspects on there, it's insane. I mean, they do have a list on the Wikipedia of ones that are viable, of like ones that they think could have potentially done it. That does include that New York Times guy that I think like tried to impregnate her or something. I didn't read too much into that. It would have been juicy, but I wasn't about to add another page to my notes.
I mean, when you were going over the suspect list, I was also kind of pulling stuff up, and another one name that I came up a few times was Leslie Dillon.
Yeah, I kept seeing that. I don't know, because that's not Christine. I don't know who that is. I didn't really. I had my lady killer at the time. Leslie Dillon. Oh, she was a bellhop. Oh my god. blackdahlia.web.unc.edu. What
I'm
am
there too.
where am I? Is this just a website dedicated to her murder? Oh,
Sorry, folks, we're just looking all this up
it
right
looks
now.
like she may have been involved. Police couldn't account for her whereabouts during between January 9th and January 15th, the days when Elizabeth Short had still been considered missing. She filed a $100,000 claim against the city of LA for how, oh my God, it's a man. It's not a woman. He was treated in the case.
You
It's a
kept
man
saying
named
she,
Leslie.
I'm like, is this person like what? Like,
It's a man. Oh my God, I feel like a dumbass. Oh my God, I forgot men were named Leslie. I know so many Leslies in my life that are not the kindest people. And anyone I've ever met named Leslie has something. But yeah, I guess the lawsuit was dropped. Oh fuck, he was wanted by Santa Monica police for robbing a hotel while he was working as a bellhop. Who's DeRiver? Dillon and DeRiver. I don't know.
the list goes on. The hunt continues.
Yeah. Well, DeRiver did interview Dillon, and when he asked about what do you think the killer did with the hair that was taken from Elizabeth, Dillon said, I think the killer, such as he was, would probably have thrown the hair into a toilet and flushed it. So he clearly wasn't admitting to anything. It didn't seem that he knew about the situation down there. Yeah. And then DeRiver goes, you're the one who murdered her. And Dillon goes, Dr. DeRiver, the trouble is that you first reach your own conclusions about this case, and then you try to dig up things to prove that your conclusions are correct. And then DeRiver goes, oh, what do you think I am, a child? Oh,
Sassy.
man. Oh, there was an undercover officer that also remembered Dillon talking about bleeding a body prior to embalming by making an incision on the upper thigh and inserting a tube to drain the blood. Oh, he had medical experience while working as a mortician's assistant.
Oh.
I wouldn't say that he's on par with Hodell. Maybe I'm missing some information, but see, that's hard. I think he was a bad dude, but I don't think he'd kill someone. He just robbed a hotel.
It's LA. Come on.
It's LA. It's LA in the 1950s. You just take a suitcase and go.
I feel like we could have part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5,
Oh,
and just
yeah.
go through and how like it's LA, it's Hollywood, and like everything is somehow connected, and they all somehow.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you're blaming Bugsy Siegel for a murder I don't think Bugsy ever got his hands dirty. I don't think so. I think he would have hired somebody to get their hands dirty.
You know, he's
yeah.
a smart guy.
He's a smart guy. I don't know what
touching this.
what are you talking about?
Get out of here.
Get out of here. Anyways. I think that's all we got for this week. Do you want to know what's coming up next week?
Hint. So we can ponder for the week. Give us some hints.
Right. So next week is a case that it's a case that I just stumbled upon when going through a bunch of different true crime cases on Wikipedia. And it's for our season finale. I had originally planned a case that took place in the UK, but it didn't work out. And then I think you numbered it and you were like, now let's save this one for next time. But I was looking at cases in the UK and this was one that popped up and I was like, this seems recent. So it's in the UK. Okay. It's recent and the police work is fucking terrible and you will be angry.
All right.
But that's all I'm giving you. I don't think I can give you much more than that.
Fair enough. Once again, KPM fans, thank you so much for joining us. Who do you think did it? Go through the suspect list. It's on Wikipedia. I looked at it. It's long.
It's long.
Do your own research. Let's figure out who the hell did this. I still want to do a little bit more research on my own, but
there's a lot of information in this case.
When there's a copycat killer or a crime that happens down the street from your house,
it's a little suspicious.
A little bit.
I mean, when you're around death so much, it's kind of like,
yeah. And the fact that once again I pulled up an article and the son is like, my dad did it. And I'm gonna fucking prove it.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Well, I'm sure he was also like going through he found an article and then he went through family photos and was like, wait a minute, that totally looks like Elizabeth. And I think people were skeptical at first, and I think that people wanted to believe that it was. I don't know if those photos were ever confirmed to be her, but they have been analyzed to hell and back. So I'm sure there's an answer out there somewhere.
Sammy, where can the good people find you?
You guys can find me at Studio Sticks on Instagram, or you can find me at Fiendish Goth on Instagram. I probably post more on Fiendish Goth. I'm trying to get my Studio Sticks shop up, but if you want to see any artwork and stuff, that would be on Fiendish Goth.
And if you want to check out her artwork, also check out that KPM merch that she designed. It's sexy as fuck.
Yeah, I need a new mouse pad. I think I'm gonna get a mouse pad.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sammy, once again, thank you for your pages of notes and your just not sleeping, trying to solve the Black Dahlia killer.
I typed forever last night. Oh man. Well, we got next week for you, so stay tuned.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Sammy, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Peace.